Hey boat dragons, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about why I think you should read the Sandman graphic novel series. Let's go. Thank you to my patrons. I really appreciate all you do to support the channel. So with the Sandman series coming to Netflix very soon, August 5th, 2022 to be exact, I thought this was a great opportunity to talk about why I think you should read the Sandman graphic novel series. So without wasting any time, we're going to get right to it today, okay? The Sandman series is considered by most to be Neil Gaiman's magnum opus. It is what made him popular. It's what put him on the fantasy map. And it is just a phenomenal series. And I'm new to the series. I only started reading the graphic novels for Sandman last year. And I can't imagine why I waited so long to read them. I'd heard about them prior to that. I'm just so glad I finally got them under my belt, being a huge Neil Gaiman fan like I am. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what you can expect if you read The Sandman. So this is the first or last volume in The Sandman, depending on how you look at it. This is Sandman Overture, but it is comprised of a total of 12 different graphic novels in the first original Sandman arc. There is a new arc of Sandman called Sandman Universe. I have not read it yet, but it kind of continues the story from where the original series left off. But this video is only dealing with the first 12 volumes. The Sandman is a dark urban fantasy graphic novel series. It mostly takes place in two different settings. One is Earth during the mid-80s to late 90s, and the other is the Dreaming, which is an immaterial, probability-based ether world of sorts. It's the realm where all of our thoughts and feelings and emotions come together into these things that we call dreams. And the Lord of Dreams, Morpheus, also known as the Sandman and also known as Dream, is the master over the dream world. Now there are other places that pop up during the story. There are stories that take place in Asgard, some of them in Hell, some of them in the realm of Fairy. And so you've got a lot of different locales that pop up into this, but they are all part of the dream world and of the real world as they kind of get meshed together. Some of those exist in a pocket in between the two worlds, right? Asgard is a mythical world, as is Fairy, and they kind of exist in between. So next I want to talk briefly about the art style. It is a very avant-garde, surrealist type of art. You might think in terms of Picasso when you think of the art style that is used for the Sandman graphic novels, and I'll show you some of it here in a minute. It is almost like you're in a fever dream the whole time you're reading these, because you've got all these just wild and weird images and bursts of color, all the different colors of the spectrum, and it really feels like something that you would see if you were in your dream world. And I'm going to show you just briefly some of the artwork that you can expect. You saw the cover, but there's so much here. Like there's this pull out. You can see Dream there with his mask. On the next page, you can see just you can see the kind of artwork that I'm talking about. I mean, this is the stuff that you end up encountering through the entirety of Sandman. And so it's definitely something that you have to be in a mood for something positively strange, a very good strange. So let's talk briefly about the company that created this. This was originally published by Vertigo Comics. That's the imprint, who later got bought out by DC Comics, but they were all kind of working in tandem together all along before the official merger happened. So when you get the Sandman graphic novels, you will notice that the first series have the Vertigo imprint on them, and the final 4 or 5 volumes have the DC logo on them. So it's part of DC Comics, kind of always has been. And this is important because you will encounter DC characters in this universe. You'll encounter the Justice League. You will encounter Dr. Destiny. You will encounter John Constantine and his mother Joanna Constantine. You will encounter various different characters from DC Comics that are very familiar to you if you read those comics, and they all play in the same space as the Sandman and become part of this weird, surreal fever dream. So next, I want to talk briefly about how these graphic novels portray humanity. This is very important. Sandman established itself right out the gate, being very forward-thinking, very open-minded, very culturally aware, much more so than its contemporaries at the time. Neil Gaiman was writing these graphic novels from a multicultural perspective. There's many different cultures portrayed in this series. Anything from African culture to Japanese culture to American culture. It's very forward-thinking in terms of racial portrayals. It's very forward-thinking in terms of gender portrayals. Neil Gaiman was writing trans and non-binary characters before it was popular, and he was doing so in a way that treated them with the utmost respect and dignity that they deserve, and it was just beautifully done. In fact, one of Dream's siblings is non-binary, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But, this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. Non-binary folk and trans folk have always been around, but at this time that these graphic novels were created, they weren't given the same amount of equality that maybe they enjoy now, and even nowadays they don't enjoy the same equality as other people in so many respects. And so I was really impressed as I was reading these graphic novels to see all these different types of characters and beings who are, some of them conventional and some of them unconventional for the time it was written, and that just really impresses me about Neil Gaiman, that he was so forward thinking in creating these comics and including characters that may not have had the limelight at that time in other works. So in terms of inclusion and representation, this is a very good series for that. If you're looking for works that are big on representation, this is one of them. So now let's talk about some of the characters. And first and foremost, we're going to talk about Dream. He is the primary character of the Sandman series. It bears his name. He is the Sandman. He controls the dreams of people in this world, and those dreams can be very comforting. Those dreams can be very horrific. If Dream has a grudge against you, that's a bad thing, because you're going to end up having very awful dreams, and in many respects being stuck inside your nightmares. So you don't want to piss off Dream. And he appears in many different forms throughout this series. Some of them as a very tall, gaunt and pale white male. In other stories, he appears as an African male. In other stories, he appears as a cat. And so he has various different guises that he portrays himself as the situation arises, and depending on what culture he is finding himself in at any given time. And the reason he can do this is because it is his nature. In fact, it's the nature of all the endless. And the endless are raceless, genderless, speciesless beings who have always existed and will always exist until the very end of time. Dream is the first and foremost of those, and of course, like I said, this is his series, but he does have 6 other siblings. There is Death, Despair, Delirium, who used to be Delight before she kind of went bonkers, Desire, who is the very epitome of a non-binary character in this story. They are represented that way in this story as a non-binary character. And then there is also Destiny and Destruction. And you can tell by each of their names, including Dream, that they are representative of the major realities of human existence. Everyone dreams, everyone dies, everyone suffers despair and heartache and delirium at times. So they represent the different facets of human existence. And they are just fascinating to get to know. The one you will get to know the most is Dream, of course, but you will get to know his other siblings as the story progresses, some of them more than others. For example, Desire is very fond of playing tricks and pranks on Dream to try and snare him in their traps, and it's just humorous at times to see the ways that Desire tries to trip Dream up. You will see Desire quite heavily in the story. You will see Death often in the story, and then there are others that you see just on occasion pop up in the story, like Despair and Destiny. They have their part to play, but they don't show up as much. There are some other characters that are connected with the Endless, specifically Dream. Lucian is his librarian, and Matthew the Raven used to be a human, and then he died and Dream allowed him to become his Raven. And so he's kind of the messenger for Dream, and it's just brilliantly done. I love Matthew the Raven. He's one of my favorite characters. So I think, if you like animal companions, he's kind of a different animal companion, but he's great. Matthew's awesome. And there are some other characters as well that serve and work in Morpheus' Dream, in Dream's castle. And then you also have some human characters as well. There's plenty of them to be had. I talked about John Constantine and Joanna Constantine. You also got the Justice Society. We talked about them. There is a quirky figure from American history called Joshua Edward Norton. He was the Emperor of the United States in the late 1800s, and in this story he makes an appearance, and he is granted his position as Emperor by Dream himself. But you can look him up. He is a part of American history. Just look up Emperor of the United States and you can read his story. So there are different historical figures that make an appearance in the story, mainly those of significance like William Shakespeare and things like that, but you have others as well. And so this is just as much a human story as it is a supernatural and fantastical story, because Dream is intimately involved in the affairs of human beings as it relates to their dream states, and he can grant them boons, and they make pleas to him and supplication to him. So it's really neat to see how human history is interwoven in this mix as well. So now let's talk about the magic system. There are various different types of magic in this book, the primary magic system being the controlling of dreams, of course, handled by the Dream King himself, by Morpheus, by Dream. And then you've also got other forms of magic. There's dark magic, there's witchcraft, there's the summoning of spirits, and all of these play different parts in the story. Right at the very beginning, the story of Morpheus begins as he is trapped by a incantation of dark magic. And we'll talk about that a little bit now as we are moving into the plot of the story. So the main thrust of this story follows Morpheus, as I've said, and at the very beginning of the story there is a businessman by the last name of Burgess who has taken it upon himself to gather a group of people to conjure a spell that will trap death. The goal is to prevent death from having any further jurisdiction over humanity, in the hopes that humanity will live forever. A mistake is made for whatever reason, and they end up trapping Dream. And so Dream is imprisoned in this man's basement for 70 years. And eventually he breaks free, and he goes to recollect his artifacts, his bag of sand, his special red jewel that he has infused his power into, a mask that he wears that he obtained in a battle against a dark foe. And once he is released, he finds all the ways that time and reality and the dream world have changed in his absence. He finds his kingdom in particular almost completely breaking down. He has to go to hell to treat with Lucifer to get one of his artifacts back. He has to basically reclaim his life from the 70 years that were taken from him. From that first volume where all this is happening, we just go on this weird mind trip throughout different events in history and different cultures and different universes and all these different events that happen in human history, and some of them that might have happened differently if Dream had been around. Dream starts off very, very bitter, very cynical, very heartless in so many ways, and throughout the course of the story we see him become this more caring individual, and the character growth in him is just amazing to watch. Even though he's one of the endless and he exists outside of time, he still exhibits human emotions and human growth, and it's just amazing to watch. I think that anyone could benefit from reading The Sandman. I think you should read the Sandman graphic novel series. If anything that I've talked about in this video today resonates with you, if it makes you want to hear more, if it makes you want to start reading this series, I would be absolutely thrilled to hear that. And you know, maybe you're not into comic books, and that's okay. It's not your typical comic book. It is an adult comic book. You will find things in there that are very, very adult. There is nudity, there are sexual connotations, there is language at several points throughout the graphic novel series, so keep that in mind if that bothers you. But it's just fantastic, and I highly recommend this series to anyone. I am very, very impressed with what I'm seeing with the different shots and the clips from the upcoming show. I'm loving what they're doing with it. The guy that they have cast in the role of Dream is phenomenal. He is just what I would have pictured a live action version of Dream to look like and sound like. They made some great choices and changes in the show as well. In the show, instead of being in prison for 70 years, Dream has now been in prison for 100 years so that they could bring it up to date with cell phones and things like that. I think that's a great change. And I love the fact that they have cast a non-binary character in the role of Desire. That's the way it should be. I was so pleased to see that change. They have cast a female in the role of the librarian. So instead of Lucien, it's Lucienne. And I think that actor is going to do a phenomenal job. I just can't wait to see their portrayal of Lucienne. I'm also very much looking forward to Matthew the Raven, because they have cast Patton Oswalt to play him, and Patton Oswalt is a perfect choice. So I'm just really, really thrilled with everything I'm seeing. That the actor that they got to portray Death looks phenomenal, and I just can't say enough good about what I'm seeing for the Sandman TV series. So I have rambled about a lot of things, but if you would like to know more, if you have other questions about the series, hit me up in the comments below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you plan to read the series? Also, let me know, have you read the Sandman universe, the new continuation series that followed the original Sandman arc? What do you think of it? Do you think it's something I would like? I think it probably is, but I would like to hear your viewpoint. That is it, guys. Again, just an absolute spectacle from Neil Gaiman that is well worth your time. I hope you will read it. I hope you will read more books, including this one. And until next time, I'll talk to you later.